What happens when one of Hollywood's most legendary actors meets a host who's determined to make him squirm? You won't believe what unfolds when Robert De Niro sits down with Stephen Colbert, and the conversation takes a shocking turn that nobody saw coming. Last night's episode delivered one of the most explosive confrontations in late-night television history, and by the end of it, De Niro was walking off the set in fury. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two powerhouses clash in ways that will leave you speechless. The tension was palpable from the moment Robert De Niro walked onto the Late Show stage. The legendary actor, known for his no-nonsense attitude and fierce political opinions, seemed already on edge as he took his seat across from Stephen Colbert. What started as typical late-night banter quickly revealed itself to be something far more sinister, a carefully orchestrated ambush disguised as entertainment. Colbert opened with his trademark smirk, leaning back in his chair with an air of superiority that immediately put De Niro on the defensive. "Robert, it's great to have you here," Colbert began, his voice dripping with false warmth. "I have to say, you've been quite vocal about politics lately. Some might say, obsessively vocal." De Niro's jaw tightened visibly, his famous intensity already beginning to surface. "I speak my mind, Stephen. That's what Americans are supposed to do, right? Or did that change when you decided to become a corporate puppet?" The audience gasped at the unexpected directness, but Colbert's smile only widened, clearly relishing the opportunity to push buttons. "Corporate puppet? That's interesting coming from someone who's made a career out of playing tough guys while living in a bubble of Hollywood privilege. Tell me, when was the last time you actually talked to a real working-class American?" "Every fucking day," De Niro shot back, his voice rising. "Unlike you, sitting in your ivory tower making jokes while real people suffer. You think this is all a game, don't you? People's lives, their struggles, it's all just material for your little comedy show." Colbert leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with malicious intent. "Oh, so now you're the voice of the people? The multi-millionaire actor who owns properties around the world is going to lecture me about understanding regular Americans? That's rich, Bobby." The condescending use of Bobby was clearly calculated, and it hit its mark. De Niro's hands clenched on the armrests of his chair. "Don't you dare patronize me, you smug piece of shit. I've worked for everything I have. I came from nothing, from the streets of New York, while you went to some fancy college and learned how to be a professional ass-kisser." "Northwestern University, actually," Colbert replied with mock pleasantness. "And speaking of ass-kissing, how does it feel to have spent the last few years desperately trying to stay relevant by latching onto political controversies? Is that what they call method acting, becoming the angry old man you play in movies?" The insult landed like a physical blow. De Niro's face darkened, his legendary temper beginning to boil over. "You want to see angry? I'll show you angry. You sit there every night, safe behind your desk, making cute little jokes while the country burns. You're a coward, Stephen. A fucking coward who hides behind comedy because you don't have the balls to take a real stand on anything." Colbert's mask was beginning to slip, his own anger starting to show through the practiced television persona. "A coward? I've been speaking truth to power every night for years, while you've been making forgettable movies and embarrassing yourself at award shows. At least I'm entertaining while I do it." "Entertaining?" De Niro laughed bitterly. "You call this shit entertaining? You're a dancing monkey for the network executives, Stephen. They wind you up and you perform, just like they tell you to. You wouldn't know real truth if it bit you in your privileged ass." The studio audience was dead silent now, sensing that something had gone horribly wrong. This wasn't the playful back and forth they'd come to expect from Colbert's show. This was raw, ugly, and getting worse by the second. Colbert's producers were frantically gesturing from the wings, but both men were too locked in their escalating battle to notice. "You know what your problem is, Bobby?" Colbert said, his voice taking on a cruel edge. "You're a has-been who thinks shouting political slogans will make people remember that you used to be somebody. But all you're doing is proving that age hasn't brought you wisdom, just bitterness." De Niro stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with a harsh sound that echoed through the stunned studio. Has been? I've got more talent in my pinky finger than you have in your entire manufactured personality. You're nothing but a cheap imitation of better hosts, Stephen. A corporate sellout pretending to have principles. But what happened next would push this confrontation beyond the point of no return. Colbert, clearly rattled by De Niro's standing and the intensity of his words, made a critical mistake. Instead of trying to de-escalate, he doubled down with a vicious personal attack that would ignite the legendary actor's fury to unprecedented levels. You know what, Robert? Sit down. You're embarrassing yourself. This is exactly why nobody takes aging actors seriously when they try to play politics. You're having a senior moment on live television. The words hung in the air like poison. De Niro's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, and then pure, unbridled rage. The audience collectively held its breath as they watched one of cinema's greatest talents process what might have been the most disrespectful thing anyone had ever said to him on television. A senior moment? De Niro's voice was dangerously quiet now, the kind of controlled fury that his most terrifying movie characters were known for. You cocky little prick. I was making award-winning films when you were still figuring out how to tie your goddamn shoes. Senior moment? I'll show you what experience looks like. But Colbert wasn't backing down. If anything, he seemed energized by the chaos he'd unleashed. Experience? You mean like your experience bombing at the box office for the last decade? Or your experience making cringe-worthy political rants that even your fellow liberals are embarrassed by? Face it, Bobby. You're yesterday's news trying to stay relevant by shouting louder than everyone else. The insult about his recent film career struck deep. De Niro's hands were shaking now, not with age but with rage. You want to talk about box office, you piece of shit? I've made more money and touched more lives with my art than you ever will sitting behind that desk making safe jokes for middle America. You're a fucking fraud, Stephen. A corporate-approved rebel who never rebelled against anything that mattered. At least I know my audience. Colbert shot back, his mask of civility completely gone now. At least I don't go on unhinged rants that make people change the channel. You've become a parody of yourself, Robert. A angry old man yelling at clouds, except the clouds are cameras and you think it makes you profound. De Niro stepped closer to the desk, his famous intensity now focused like a laser on his tormentor. Unhinged? You want to see unhinged? I've been in this business for 50 fucking years. I've worked with the greatest directors, the greatest actors, the greatest writers. And you're nothing but a replaceable talking head reading words other people wrote for you. Replaceable? Colbert laughed, but it was a harsh, ugly sound. I've got an Emmy-winning show that millions of people watch every night. When's the last time millions of people voluntarily watched one of your movies? I'll wait. The audience was completely silent now, some covering their mouths in shock, others pulling out phones to record what was clearly spiraling into one of the most uncomfortable moments in late-night television history. Production assistants were frantically trying to signal for a commercial break, but both men were too locked in their verbal warfare to notice anything else. You're pathetic, De Niro snarled. You hide behind your writers, your producers, your network. You're a coward who thinks being sarcastic makes you brave. In my day, men settled things like men, not by making cute little jokes from behind a desk. Colbert stood up to match De Niro's aggressive posture, his own anger finally overwhelming his media training. Your day is over, old man. This is my house, my show, my rules. And right now, you're making a complete ass of yourself in front of my audience. Maybe it's time you learned when to shut up and listen to your betters. My betters? De Niro's voice rose to a roar that could be heard throughout the studio. You arrogant little shit. You wouldn't last 5 minutes in my world. You've never created anything, never risked anything, never put your soul on the line for your art. You're a manufactured personality selling manufactured outrage to manufactured people. The personal nature of the attacks was escalating beyond anything either man had probably intended, but neither seemed capable of backing down. Colbert, his face flushed with anger, pointed an accusatory finger at De Niro. At least I don't have to rely on movies I made 30 years ago to maintain my reputation. At least I'm not desperately clinging to relevance by attaching myself to every political controversy that comes along. You're like a has-been rock star doing nostalgia tours. Pathetic and sad. That was the final straw. De Niro's control snapped completely, And what followed would ensure this confrontation went down in television infamy. You know what, Stephen? De Niro's voice dropped to a menacing whisper that somehow carried more threat than any shout. You want to talk about has-beens and nostalgia tours? Let me tell you something about legacy, you insignificant little worm. When I'm dead and gone, people will still be watching Taxi Driver, Goodfellas, and Raging Bull. They'll be studying my performances in film schools and talking about the craft I brought to cinema. But you'll be forgotten the moment they replace you with the next corporate-approved puppet. Colbert's face went pale, but his pride wouldn't let him retreat. Is that supposed to scare me? Your threats? Your intimidation tactics? This isn't one of your tough guy movies, Robert. This is real life. And in real life, you're just another bitter old celebrity who can't accept that his time is up. De Niro slammed his hand down on Colbert's desk with such force that the coffee mug jumped and spilled its contents across the papers. The sound echoed through the studio like a gunshot. My time is up? My time is up? You little piece of shit. I've forgotten more about talent and integrity than you'll ever know. You sit here every night kissing ass and playing it safe while I've spent my entire career taking risks and pushing boundaries. Pushing boundaries? Colbert laughed maniacally, his composure completely shattered. You mean like pushing the boundaries of coherent speech at award shows? Or pushing the boundaries of how embarrassing a legendary actor can make himself in public? Because if that's boundary pushing, then congratulations, you're a fucking pioneer. The profanity from Colbert sent shockwaves through the audience. This was no longer a television interview. It had devolved into something primal and ugly. De Niro leaned across the desk, getting inches from Colbert's face, his eyes blazing with decades of accumulated fury. You want to see embarrassing, Stephen? Embarrassing is being a gutless coward who hides behind jokes because you're too fucking scared to say what you really think. Embarrassing is being a middle-aged man who still acts like the class clown because you never developed a real personality. Embarrassing is thinking that reading other people's words makes you clever. Colbert stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. Get the fuck out of my face, you senile old bastard. You think because you made some good movies 40 years ago that gives you the right to come on my show and act like some kind of moral authority? You're nothing but a washed-up actor who found a second career as a political crackpot. The studio erupted in gasps and shocked murmurs. Security personnel started moving closer to the stage, unsure whether they should intervene. De Niro straightened up, his famous intensity now focused like a death ray on his tormentor. Washed up? Senile? You pathetic little man. I've lived more, seen more, and accomplished more than you ever will. And you know what the difference is between us, Stephen? When people remember me, they'll remember an artist who never compromised, who never sold out, who never kissed ass to get ahead. But you'll be remembered as the guy who lost his shit on live television because he couldn't handle being called out by his betters. Colbert's face was now bright red, veins visible on his forehead. My betters? You're not my better, you're my cautionary tale. You're what happens when actors think their opinion matters more than everyone else's. You're a relic, Robert. A fucking relic who doesn't know when to shut up and fade away gracefully. That final insult, being called a relic, seemed to crystallize everything De Niro felt about the encounter, about the disrespect, about the way Hollywood legends were treated by younger, lesser talents. His response came with the weight of 5 decades in the business, and the authority of someone who had nothing left to lose. You know what, Stephen? Fuck you. Fuck your show. Fuck your fake audience. And fuck your corporate masters who trained you to bark on command. De Niro ripped off his microphone and threw it on the desk. I came here thinking maybe you were different. Maybe you had some integrity. But you're just another talking head. Another puppet dancing for the network executives. You're exactly what's wrong with this business. No soul, no courage, no honor. Colbert was shaking with rage now, all pretense of professionalism abandoned. Then get the hell out. Nobody's keeping you here. Go back to your mansion and your bitter old man routine. I'm sure your next straight-to-streaming movie will be a masterpiece. De Niro turned to face the audience, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had commanded screens for half a century. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what passes for entertainment these days. A spineless host attacking his guests because he can't handle an honest conversation. This man represents everything that's fake and cowardly about modern media. He turned back to Colbert one final time, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "You're a disgrace to everyone who ever sat behind that desk, Stephen. You're a disgrace to comedy, to journalism, and to basic human decency. And history will remember which one of us maintained their dignity tonight." With that, Robert De Niro walked off the stage, leaving behind a stunned audience, a humiliated host, and what would undoubtedly become one of the most talked-about moments in late-night television history. The cameras kept rolling as Colbert stood there, speechless for perhaps the first time in his career, watching one of Hollywood's greatest legends disappear into the wings, taking with him any pretense that this had been just another celebrity interview.